You never forget the sound of your own child's voice telling you you're not welcome. It doesn't matter if that child is 5 or 35. The pitch might change, the vocabulary certainly does, but the core of it, that seismic shock to the very foundation of your soul, that remains exactly the same. It was December 23rd. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and wood smoke, and I was packing my old Ford Taurus. A new set of flannel pajamas for my grandson, Leo, wrapped in paper covered with reindeer. A bottle of expensive bourbon for my son, David, because he'd developed a taste for the good stuff. A hand-knitted scarf for my daughter-in-law, Chloe, in her favorite shade of blue. The back seat was a testament to a grandfather's love, a Christmas bounty bought on a fixed income.
My phone rang.
David's face flashed on the screen. I smiled, wiping a bit of snow from the windshield, thinking he was calling to see how far along I was.
Hey, son.
Just loading up. Should be there in about 3 hours. Traffic permitting. Christmas together since you were born. Your mother and I trailed off. The mention of Sarah, gone 5 years now, hanging between us like a ghost. I know, and that's part of it. He sounded pained now, but resolute. Look, things are just complicated this year. We need some space. Just us. As a family. The words landed like physical blows. Just us. As a family. As if I were no longer part of that equation. As if I were an outsider, an intruder. David, I said, my own voice dropping to a whisper. I don't understand. What did I do? If I've done something to upset you or Chloe, please just tell me.
We can talk about it.
We can fix it. There's nothing to fix, Dad. It's not about one thing. It's everything. The way you are. It's just better if you stay home this year. The way you are. What did that mean? The way I told the same old stories? The way I maybe spoiled Leo a little too much? The way I still grieve for his mother in quiet moments? I was grasping at straws, but each one felt flimsy and weak. So that's it? I asked, the numbness starting to give way to a hot, sharp pain in my chest. You're banning me from Christmas? The word, banning, hung in the air, ugly and final. He didn't refute it.
I'm sorry, Dad.
I really am. I'll call you after the holidays. And then, the click. The dial tone was the loneliest sound I have ever heard. I stood there in my driveway, the winter cold seeping through my jacket, staring at the carefully wrapped presents in my back seat. Each one felt like a monument to my own foolishness. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, I mechanically unpacked the car. I carried the gifts back inside my quiet, empty house and piled them under my own small, pathetic tree. The silence was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen, each tick a mockery of the festive chaos that should have been filling my next few days. The anger came then. A hot, righteous fury. How dare he? After everything. After driving him to 1,000,000 hockey practices, after helping him buy his first house, after being there the day Leo was born. To be cast aside like yesterday's news. My pride flared.
Fine.
If he doesn't want me, then I don't need him. But by the morning of the 24th, the anger had burned out, leaving only a hollow, aching sadness. The house was too quiet. The memories were too loud. I saw Sarah's face everywhere, heard her laughter and the rustle of the tree's branches. She would have been so heartbroken by this. She lived for Christmases with her family all under one roof. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't sit in that shrine to my own rejection for 2 days. So I did the only thing that felt like movement, like action. I repacked the car. I didn't have a destination. I just knew I had to drive. I pointed the car south, toward David's town, driven by some masochistic impulse to be near them, even if I couldn't be with them. Maybe I'd get a motel room. Maybe I'd just park somewhere, and I don't know what. It was a foolish, heartbroken old man's plan. The drive was a blur of gray highway and cheery holiday billboards that felt like personal insults. Every minivan packed with kids was a dagger. Every radio Christmas song was a twist of the knife. I drove for hours, until the winter sky began to bleed into the deep purple of early evening on Christmas Eve. I found myself exiting the highway almost on autopilot, navigating the familiar streets of my son's suburb. The houses were lit up with extravagant light displays, figures of Santa and his reindeer soaring across rooftops. I drove slowly past David's street, but didn't turn down it. I couldn't bear to see the warm glow of their windows, to imagine the scene inside from which I was so pointedly excluded. I ended up at an overlook point a few miles from his neighborhood, a place that offered a panoramic view of the town below, twinkling like a bed of stars. I killed the engine. The silence of the car was absolute. This was it. My Christmas Eve. Alone in a cold car, watching the world celebrate without me. I must have dozed off, because the buzzing jolted me awake. The phone vibrating on the passenger seat was a stark intrusion in the overwhelming silence. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed 11:47 p.m. Christmas Eve was almost over. It was David's name on the screen. My heart leapt, a stupid, hopeful thing. He'd changed his mind. He'd had a change of heart. The miracle of the season. I fumbled for the phone, my hands numb with cold and anticipation. But as I went to answer, the call went to voicemail. A second later, it started ringing again.
And again.
And again. Missed call after missed call, his name flashing with a frantic, persistent rhythm I'd never seen before. This wasn't a "I'm sorry" call. This was pure, unadulterated panic. 18 calls.
18.
Followed by a single text message that lit up the screen, its words simple and terrifying. Dad, where are you?
Please.
I need you. The truth, the real truth, whatever it was, started buzzing on my phone in that cold, dark car. And the world as I knew it ended. The cold in the car was nothing compared to the ice that suddenly filled my veins. David's text wasn't an invitation, it was a distress signal. Every paternal instinct I possessed, every fiber that had been screaming in protest for the last 2 days, was now shrieking a 5-alarm fire. I didn't call back. My frozen fingers, clumsy with fear, just typed out a reply, nearby. What's wrong? His response was instantaneous, as if he'd been clutching the phone, waiting. Come to the house.
Now. Please.
It's Leo.
Le.
My grandson's name was a punch to the gut. All my self-pity, my wounded pride, evaporated in a single, terrifying second. Nothing else mattered. I turned the key, the engine roaring to life in the silent night, and I tore out of that overlook point like a man possessed. I broke every speed limit, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Visions, horrible and unbidden, flashed behind my eyes. An accident. A fever. Something he'd swallowed. The 5-minute drive felt like an eternity. I skidded to a halt in their driveway, the tires crunching on the frost-covered gravel. The house was blazing with light, every window a bright, anxious eye. The front door flew open before I could even get out of the car. David stood there, pale as a ghost, his face a mask of pure anguish. He was wearing the same sweater I'd given him last Christmas. The sight of it undid me. Dad, he choked out, and the sound was so full of relief and terror that I knew whatever was happening was catastrophic. I ran to the door, my old bones forgetting their aches. David? What is it? Where's Leo? He's here, he's in his room. With Chloe. He was shaking, his hands trembling so badly he had to shove them in his pockets. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. I've been calling you for an hour. What happened? I demanded, stepping inside. The house was warm, but it felt charged, electric with panic. It's my fault, he whispered, his voice breaking. He looked like a little boy again, scared and lost. All of it. This mess. It's all my fault. Start from the beginning, son. I said, my voice firm, the voice I'd used when he'd skinned his knee or failed a test. The dad voice. It seemed to ground him, if only for a second. He took a ragged breath. A few months ago at work, he couldn't seem to get the words out. He just shook his head, a sob catching in his throat. It doesn't matter. The point is, I made a mistake. A big one. I was scared. Ashamed. I thought I could fix it, hide it. I've been getting texts.
Threats.
Demanding money. A lot of money. Or they said they'd hurt me. Hurt us. The pieces began to click into place with a sickening clarity. His strange behavior. The stress I'd noticed, but he'd brushed off. The complicated things he couldn't talk about. Tonight, David continued, his eyes wide with remembered horror, a package was delivered. No return address. Inside it was one of Leo's stuffed animals. Mr. Snuffles. The one he takes everywhere. But it had a note pinned to it. He gestured weakly toward the kitchen island. There, lying next to a half-eaten plate of Christmas cookies, was a well-loved brown teddy bear. A single piece of paper was stabbed through its chest with a long pin. The message, printed in a cold, generic font, was brief. $50,000 by New Year's. Or the next delivery won't be a toy.
No caps.
I felt the blood drain from my face. The world tilted on its axis. This wasn't a family disagreement. This was a nightmare. My God, David. I breathed. I lost it, he said, tears finally streaming down his face. I started screaming. I threw my phone against the wall. I was so angry, so scared. Leo, he was watching his cartoons. He heard me. He saw me. David's composure completely shattered. He got so scared, Dad. He started crying, and then he stopped. He went completely quiet. He wouldn't talk. Wouldn't look at us. He just curled up in a ball on his bed, and he won't move. He won't speak. It's like he's gone inside himself. Selective mutism. The pediatrician had mentioned it once as a remote possibility when Leo was younger, an extreme shock response to trauma. The greatest trauma of his little life hadn't been a vague threat from a stranger. It had been seeing his father, his hero, utterly terrified and enraged. I pushed you away, David wept, the full weight of his decisions crashing down on him. I thought I was protecting you. If you weren't here, you wouldn't be a target. I thought I could handle it alone. I was so stupid, so proud. And now I've broken my own son. I've lost everything. The secret was out. The 18 missed calls weren't about Christmas. They were the frantic flailing of a drowning man who had finally realized he was in water way over his head, and the only lifeline was the one he'd so foolishly cast away. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, not as the man who had hurt me, but as my child, who was terrified and in unimaginable trouble. The anger was gone. There was no room for it. There was only room for the overwhelming, crushing need to fix this.
To protect my family.
Okay, I said, my voice low and steady. I put my hands on his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. Okay,
listen to me. You made a mistake.
A big one.
We will deal with that.
But right now, we are going to fix this. All of it. Do you understand me? We are a family, and we face this together. The relief that washed over his face was palpable. For the first time in months, he wasn't alone. First, I said, my mind clicking into a mode I hadn't used in decades, the problem-solving mode of a man who had provided for his family through all of life's storms. We are not paying a dime. We are calling the police. Right now. But the note said. I don't care what the note said. I interrupted, my voice leaving no room for argument. We do not negotiate with terrorists. Not ever. Now, go be with your wife and your son. Let me handle this. As David stumbled back toward Leo's bedroom, a broken man clinging to a shred of hope, I picked up the landline phone. My hand was steady. My purpose was clear. The grandfather, the unwanted guest, was gone. In his place was a father, a protector. I dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke with a calm authority that belied the storm raging inside me. Yes, hello. I need to report an extortion threat and a delivered threat against a child. Yes, I'll hold. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the muffled silence from my grandson's room, and I made a silent vow to whoever was on the other end of those threats. You picked the wrong family to mess with. The next 24 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. The police arrived, somber and efficient. They took the note and the teddy bear with a reverence reserved for objects of terrible significance. They asked their questions, and David, with me sitting steadfastly beside him, answered every single one. He confessed his initial mistake, a foolish attempt to cover up a significant accounting error at his firm, an error that had made him vulnerable to blackmail when a disgruntled subordinate discovered it. He hadn't stolen, but he had hidden the truth. And in doing so, he had handed a weapon to a coward. The detectives were sharp. They focused on the package, the phone number used for the texts, a burner, untraceable, and the specific knowledge the blackmailer had of our family. It had to be someone who knew David, knew Leo, knew the intimate details of our lives. While the police worked, I worked on my grandson. I settled into the big armchair in the corner of Leo's room. Chloe was on the floor, her back against his bed, her hand resting on his leg, her face etched with exhaustion that went deeper than bone. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a silent gratitude so profound it hurt to see. Leo was still curled in a tight ball, his back to the room, staring at the wall. He hadn't spoken a word. He'd sipped some water, but refused food. I didn't try to make him talk. I didn't try to coax him. I just started talking. I talked about his grandmother. I told him the story of the Christmas Eve I'd proposed to her, right there under the mistletoe in my parents' cramped living room. I told him about the time his father, at 4 years old, had tried to feed a carrot to the neighbor's Labrador retriever, convinced it was a reindeer. I talked about the stars outside and how his grandma believed that every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, a line she'd stolen from an old movie she loved. I talked for hours. My voice was a low, steady rumble in the quiet room, a river of familiar stories and love flowing around his small, shut-down island. I was weaving a blanket of normalcy, of safety, with nothing but my words and my presence. David came in and out, updating me on the police's progress in hushed tones. They had a lead. The delivery service used was a small, local courier. They were tracking down the driver. Late on Christmas afternoon, as the winter light began to fade, a small miracle happened. Leo, without turning over, slowly uncurled one small hand from his chest and reached it back, blindly groping behind him. His fingers found my knee and rested there. It was the smallest of gestures, but it was a crack in the dam. Chloe met my eyes, and fresh tears welled in hers, but this time, they were tears of hope. The phone rang. The landline. We all jumped. The detective who had remained in the kitchen answered it. We heard his low, murmured conversation. A moment later, he appeared in the doorway, his expression grim but satisfied. "We got him," he said simply. "The courier driver. A kid just 19. He confessed immediately. Said a man paid him $500 cash to deliver the package. Gave him a perfect description. It matches the disgruntled employee your son identified. Our guys are picking him up at his apartment right now." The air went out of the room. It was over. The threat was neutralized. The dam inside David broke completely. He sank to his knees beside Leo's bed, burying his face in the comforter, his body racked with sobs of relief, of shame, of utter exhaustion. "I'm so sorry," he cried, his voice muffled by the blanket. "I'm so sorry, Leo. Daddy was so scared and so stupid. I'm so sorry." There was a long, suspended moment, and then a tiny, hoarse voice, and used for nearly a day, spoke from the bed. "It's okay, Daddy." Leo had rolled over. His big, brown eyes were open, looking at his father. He reached out a small hand and touched David's tear-streaked cheek. "Grandpa's here. He'll make it better." In that moment, my heart didn't just heal. It expanded, growing 3 sizes, just like the Grinch's. I felt a love so fierce and so powerful it was almost dizzying. The police left soon after, taking the evidence and our statements. The monster was in a cage. The nightmare was receding. We spent the rest of Christmas evening on the floor of Leo's room, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and abandoned toys. We didn't have a fancy dinner. We ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and Christmas cookies. And it was, without a doubt, the most sacred, most beautiful Christmas of my life. Later that night, after Leo had finally fallen into a peaceful sleep and Chloe had collapsed into their bed, David and I sat at the kitchen island with 2 glasses of that expensive bourbon I'd brought. "I don't know how to ever thank you, Dad," he said, his voice raw. "Or how to ever apologize." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "And the apology, I accept it. But David, look at me."
He did.
"Never again. You hear me? You never have to face anything alone. Your mother and we raised you to be strong, but being strong doesn't mean building walls. It means knowing when to lean on the people who love you. We are your foundation. Don't ever forget that." "I won't," he whispered. "I promise." We sat in a comfortable silence for a while, the events of the past 2 days settling around us, not as a scar, but as a lesson. A hard, painful, but ultimately reforging lesson. "You know," David said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in days. "Leo was right. Grandpa did make it better." I smiled back, raising my glass. "That's my job, son. That's my job." I drove home the next day. The same road, the same car. But the world looked completely different. It wasn't gray and lonely anymore. It was bright with possibility. The presents were still in my back seat, but now they were destined for a belated Christmas celebration, one that would be louder and more joyful than any that had come before. The ban was lifted, but more than that, the silence was broken. And in its place was something stronger, more resilient, and more precious than it had ever been before: the unshakable truth of family.